What is going on? Welcome back to Trending Stocks. Today we're going to talk to you about SoFi. I want to go over some expectations for this upcoming week, what might cause volatility in the stock price, and go over everything else you need to know. But first, make sure you guys hit that thumbs up, and with that, let's get right to it. So starting off, this week is going to be relatively quiet for the beginning part. So you do have a couple of Fed speakers, no real data coming out. It's going to be more so the tail end of the week. That's going to be kind of the volatile aspect. So you do have GDP on Thursday, PCE on Friday. And so in essence, that won't really change the optimism for rate cuts, because I think based on so far the consensus for the September 18th meeting, there's a 94% likelihood of a 25 basis point cut. Even with initial jobless claims recently coming out, worse for wear, it didn't affect this. So I think this is fair to assume that despite the data, this is going to stick. I think what is up for debate now is the November meeting, because this has been really influenced. So as you can kind of see for the November 7th meeting, it's around 57.5% likelihood of a 25 basis point cut. Another 25 basis point cut. That's over and above the September meeting. So I think a lot of the data is going to change this, because initial jobless claims changed this stat, not the September one. So right now, what really fueled SoFi and many other stocks right here and started to have a lot more capital rushing into equities as a dollar value, as I've brought up in the past, the big rotation, was because of the back-to-back optimism associated to rate cuts. So in essence, pay attention very closely to GDP and PCE, so Thursday and Friday. And then over and above all of that fun stuff, you're going to have a sprinkle of FOMO. So this week, in reality, is going to be, if there is going to be FOMO, it kicks in. So SoFi typically does have some pretty kick-ass earnings time and time again. Historically, it does run up to their earnings, and then regardless of the results, it sells off. Very frustrating, but that's kind of what happens with SoFi. So in case you do not know, they have their earnings slated for the 30th. That is pre-market. So as of right now, obviously expected to be profitable. Once again, 566.69 million for revenue. Closer to that date, I'll do a kind of an expectations video on their earnings, but nonetheless, anticipate a little bit more attention coming from institutions. And you do see a lot more institutions looking at SoFi over this last week. So these are some of the transactions occurring on the secondary market above $100,000. So hopefully that does continue into this week, because like I said, assuming there's optimism for the back-to-back rate cuts, this is where in reality money from the money markets will move into equities. So I think that really should help SoFi, not this week in exact, but over the next 1 year, it'll really help propel it higher. So that's just my own opinion, of course. You guys do whatever floats your boat. When it comes down to GDP and PCE, if they are negative for whatever reason, then anticipate shorts to really double down. So on Friday, shorts did increase 147,000 shares. 17.31% of the free float is being shorted. That works to be 179.71 million shares overall are being shorted. So shorts have been somewhat giving up a lot of their, momentum that they did have, because negative data hasn't really affected the optimism in the market. Rather, a lot of trade kind of scenarios and just many other things, but data seems to be pretty solid for the most part. So if those two data points coming out this week are negative, then anticipate shorts to be very, very active. When it comes to SoFi and looking at the interest or the open interest for the options, so with it closing at $7 or below that $7.50, then regrettably this above is going to be expired worthless. As unfortunate as that sounds, because I think in reality, SoFi did have a very good opportunity to have a gamma squeeze, because especially it did briefly break over that $8 mark. And at the time, I think it was 92,000. At Friday close, it was 89,000 in open interest. That would have been huge. But as it stands, you have roughly around 30,000 in open interest at that 7, 12,000 at that 650, 3,000 at that 6. So in essence, roughly around 4.5 million shares is going to be purchased by market makers come Monday morning. Again, it could be any time, could be pre-market, but historically what I do see, it happens first thing. So you'll see a nice bump up in the stock price. Whether it sticks or not, that's obviously given the momentum in the broader market, but this is definitely something to pay attention to. For this upcoming week though, you do already have 9,000 at that 7, 18,000 at that 750. So this one will be another battle. Plus you do also see around 40,000 in open interest at that 8. So market makers are going to really have a very strong wall at that $8 mark. So once again, kind of just keep that into consideration. Once I go over the technicals and stuff like that, that might kind of factor into another heavy resistance level. But before I get into some of the short-term support and resistance points, I'll pop over to IBKR and I'll give you an overview of the Elliot Wave technical. So it does have a pivot point of $6.94, which is that 50-day moving average, because as I've said, historically in SoFi's case, whenever it does and is able to get above that 50-day moving average for at least 2 consecutive trading days, it does typically run around 30 to 40%. So I think that also is still very optimistic. So even though SoFi has been consolidating over the last several trading days, the technicals are looking fairly good. So as it stands, it is projected to hit between that 850 and 880 mark in the short term. Of course, like I said, once the consolidation is done and everything else. So yeah, I just wanted to quickly pop on for that and give you an overview. But as it stands, with it closing at $7.47 on Friday, it is trading between this R1 and this R2. So watch for 721 to be the next strong support. It wasn't tested at all on Friday nor Thursday, or pretty much majority of the week. 750 is going to be a key pivot for SoFi, at least in the short term. So definitely watch for it to get above that. And then on the flip side, $7.97 is going to be kind of that other resistance slash target. So yeah, definitely I think the Elliot Wave technicals are really pointing for it to easily break past this R2 and clearly R3, but most likely it's going to be their earnings that's going to be that deciding factor that pushes it to kind of the 850 range. We'll just have to wait and see. So I think all in all, technicals are looking fairly good. Shorts are somewhat waiting to pounce. The optimism when it comes down to the options are signaling for it to be in excess of $8, as I kind of pointed out. So yeah, I think right now it should be a pretty interesting week, but like I said, it all comes down to the data points. These two things are going to really dictate what the hell happens with SoFi, whether it does completely break down into their earnings, maybe sub $7 or potentially above $8. So just anticipate a lot of volatility. So like I said, when it comes down to volatile stocks, take advantage and do options. If you don't know them, highly recommend you guys just kind of watching a couple YouTubes on that, or just a couple articles or whatever else. They can be very, very beneficial. And this is why roughly on a daily basis, about like $6 or $7 million is using options every single day. So highly recommend you guys doing that. So with all that said, appreciate all you guys watching. Hopefully everyone has a good weekend and has had a good weekend. And with all that said, appreciate all of you watching.